Good morning. So today on the podcast we have Graham Bartlett, who I was introduced to him around about September last year through my editor Rebecca Miller, and he has been a fountain of knowledge ever since. I've attended several of his courses and we've had kind of one-to-one chats about the crime books that I'm working on. But Graham, let me hand over to you to introduce yourself properly.
Hi, and thanks ever so much for inviting me. We're both in our sheds, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, yeah.
We joke about our sheds. Yeah, so I'm Graham Bartlett. I'm a police advisor to crime writers and an author in my own right. Former police officer, worked 30 years in Sussex Police, mainly as a detective during that time, but ended up as being the sort of head of police at Brighton and Hove. And I try and bring all that experience really into both my writing and also advising and training authors.
And you run courses as well with Professional Writing Academy, which I've been on the forensic one.
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's great fun. That sort of came up really just at the beginning of lockdown, just by chance, really. And so we run a variety of online courses. So we have crime weekends where we start on a Friday night and people visit a crime scene, and it's not a real crime scene, obviously, but a crime scene set up. And then over the weekend, they kind of develop a story, but we feed in information as they go through. So they're not getting everything up front, they're getting it as they would in a real investigation. And we've got authors like Mark Billingham, Peter James, Ellie Griffiths giving inputs about how they approach research and how they do their how they develop their protagonists and their antagonists. And then we do bespoke one-day courses. So we've done forensics, as you came on, and
yeah, I did.
Custody and interviewing. We're just developing one around police use of firearms, because that's something that comes up quite a lot, and covert policing as well. So lots of things with the Professional Writing Academy, who are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant team to work with.
And their platform's really easy to use as well, which is always makes it easier.
Yeah, I mean, I did a couple of their courses. They deliver the Faber courses. I didn't realise that it was the same people, and I did a couple of those about 18 months ago, and thought, well, how am I going to get on with it? But it's so intuitive. It's marvelous, and the moderators are brilliant.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah,
they keep you on track.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. And so as well as all that, you are also an author in your own right. I've just finished reading Babes in the Wood, which I read on my Kindle, which I couldn't put down actually. I think I've read it in about the space of a week, and it's a mammoth book. So we'll dive more into that. And then this, which has become a little bit of my Bible, I have to say. There's some post-it notes sticking out the side there because it got some really good reference points. And that's Death Comes Knocking, which we both co-authored with Peter James. But the Death Comes Knocking is based around policing Brighton. So let's talk about Babes in the Wood first. I mean, wow. For anybody that's not familiar with the case, can you just give us an overview of what it's about?
Yeah, so in 1986, a couple of young girls on an estate from Brighton went off just to play in the park just after school, and they never came back. And there was a huge search for them, which culminated the next afternoon in their bodies being found in woods, probably 150, 200 yards from their home. And it kind of rocked the community, and in that search, lots of people have been involved. And then one person started to figure as the suspect, and he was somebody that seemed to be putting himself front and center of the search. And that was a man by the name of Russell Bishop. And various inconsistencies in the story and forensic evidence. Don't forget, this was 1986, so before DNA, led the police to charge him with both murders. Year later, he was acquitted and released into the community, which was horrific, really, for those of us that knew what happened. Went on to commit another very serious crime, for which he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Then, over the decades, the law changed, science changed, and this is Babes in the Wood is the story about how the police and family use the change in law and use the change in science to have a second go at Bishop. And it tells how how that happened and what happened at the end of 2018, exactly 31 years to the day after he was acquitted, what happened at the Old Bailey.
I mean, I was familiar with the story through because I listened to quite a lot of true crime podcasts, and a couple of people had covered it, so I knew the story as a whole, but the book itself goes into so much detail. And what I found really fascinating was the comparison between the different forensics that were available when because it was retried, wasn't it, and then it was the third time when he was convicted, and then in the final time how every piece of forensic evidence was not just checked and double checked, but you had was it Ross, wasn't it, that was there to kind of stand and double check everything, so there was no way that Bishop was ever going to be able to kind of get off with it. But his story changed so many times. I would imagine you weren't on the case, but you were kind of, as you were moving up through the ranks and over the years, you became more involved with it. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I wasn't on the initial case.
Yeah.
I was very much involved in the second case, where he tried to kill a girl in almost identical circumstances.
Yeah, that was Claire, wasn't it?
That's it. Yeah, which isn't her real name because
no.
She has lifelong anonymity. So I was involved in that, so I could tell that from the inside and really sort of talk about that. But yeah, I mean, we know that defence will quite rightly test any evidence at all to the end, be that forensic witness, interview evidence. They will absolutely go for it because that's their job. That's what people are entitled to a competent defence. So the change in science was one thing, but so it was possible to get DNA, it's possible to get DNA because that wasn't possible in 1986, but it was possible to get DNA off minute, invisible samples. But the key wasn't really, was it Russell Bishop's DNA on this clothing that would eventually convict him? It was, how did it get there? And is there any possibility at all that it could have got there either through mishandling or through some sort of corrupt means? And the defence would go for that. We knew that the investigation team knew that they would go for that. So yes, what the investigation team decided to do was they would have one forensic scientist who would be doing the examinations and the interpretations and the identifications, and basically another one who was trying to break all that. Really trying to being quite a sort of assertive, critical friend on every. It goes far more than peer review. This was right. You proved to me that this sample couldn't have got there through other. And there, you've read it, so you'll know that there was a moment in there.
Yeah.
It looked like all was lost. It really was, and they had to pick themselves up for that. But if they hadn't done that work, the defence would have done it for them.
Yeah, exactly. And just the ingenuity of thinking of the inside of the sleeve cuff where the DNA might be was, and that we had the technology and the science to be able to pull that apart and take that. And then the skin cells that were found on Karen's right arm. I mean, it just, tell me, Graham, when you're writing something like this, because obviously you weren't involved in the beginning, but you knew kind of as the story went on, as I said, how on earth do you go about getting all this evidence and knowledge and condensing it? I say condensing it, it's a monster of a book, but putting it into a format where somebody, like a layman like me, can read and kind of understand and get. But what's your process? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, there's no shortcut really. I mean, I was at the Old Bailey just about every day for the retrial, from the middle of October to just before Christmas 2018, listening to all of the evidence. I had the prosecution opening note that was made available to me, which was 70 pages long. So that had a lot of the detail in, but also, I could have probably written the book just from that. There was enough in it, but I wanted to get the personal side of it. I wanted to see the scientists give their evidence, and I wanted to just kind of understand what it meant to them, but also understand their professionalism as well. So there was that. I interviewed dozens of ex-police officers, but that was difficult because I couldn't interview them before the trial because they were potentially witnesses. So I had to go and interview them after the trial, and my publisher put quite a testing deadline. First of all, they said I wouldn't get the contract if he wasn't convicted, which was fair enough because the way that I'd written the book
was leading
for a conviction. And then when he was convicted, they wanted delivery within about 2 months. I managed to negotiate another month out, but I said there's a lot to do on this still. But it was, that I think interviewing the people was the key to it, because I understand police culture and I understand how it's changed over the years, and this book tells that story. And as a kind of theme, you've got this kind of how police culture as well as the science and practices have changed. But speaking to officers who were in charge of and working at quite a low level on that first inquiry 30 odd years on, and seeing them cry when I'm talking to them, big tough blokes these were, I knew them, and some of them were pretty scary. There's a bloke in there called Smudge Smith, who's Paul Smith, who I refer to, probably the hardest policeman I know, yet openly cries every time he talks about finding the bodies.
I think
sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that was one of the things that came across in handfuls in the book, was how, I know as a police officer and working for the police service, you need to have this ability to put your emotions to one side and deal with it as a case. But I couldn't, there were so many times when it seemed so close to prosecution, and for something to let it down. Kind of the mental impact of that, the psychological impact of that must have been massive. So when that justice was reached 31, 32 years later, must have been huge. And how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that, with the switching off from the emotional side of it? Because it's young girls as well, which I think is always, and if you have children yourself, it's always tough.
Yeah, and you have to kind of start from the premise that you're there to do a job as a police officer. Right? You're no good to anybody if you kind of fold in every time anything distressing happens. But you also have to remember that you're a human being, and sometimes situations, cases will seep over, and they will affect you, and you have to. I used to say this to my officers as I sort of went up the ranks. You have to kind of know that and acknowledge that, and have a strategy for dealing with that, because sometimes it will come out of the blue. Sometimes on a case like this, you kind of predict that it's going to happen. But nowadays they have all sorts of wonderful support mechanisms in place. In 1986 they didn't. And when you've got officers that have spent nearly 24 hours searching in the hope that they're going to find these girls, probably cold, scared, might be hurt but alive, suddenly find them murdered in quite the most horrific way. And then there was nowhere for them to go other than the pub to deal with those emotions, and that was unhealthy. And that's why I think a lot of emotions have kind of festered over the years. That's not criticising the police, because that's kind of where we were as a society in those days. But as a police officer at the time, you have to deal with it. You can go home at night and cry. You can go to the pub, get drunk and all of that. But when you're actually dealing with it, no one else is going to come and take over from you. So you owe it to the families, you owe it to the girls to be professional and to get justice for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine. How long did it take you to write the book then?
I would say about 3 years in all, but there was a real gap in that because I got as far as I could, which was around the time that the acquittals were quashed, and then there was a year that I couldn't write anymore because I had to wait for the trial. So I spent that time sort of polishing it, etc. But it was very, very much a kind of work in progress because the trial could have taken me in all sorts of different directions. So 2/3 of it probably, probably sort of 18 months to write, and then the other third, as I say, I had to I had to rush it after the trial finished.
Yeah. So moving on to your other book, Death Comes Knocking, which has turned into a bit of a Bible for me. Again, it's brilliant, written in conjunction with Peter James. You've worked with Peter quite a lot on the Roy Grace series of books. How did that come about?
Well, when I was in the police, he already had a relationship with Sussex Police where he was allowed to come in and speak with officers and give, go out and patrol with them. And there was a kind of understanding, and we wouldn't let him see things that he wasn't allowed to see, or he would always run stuff past us that he was going to write. And I, when I was, I think I was a deputy divisional commander then. I got to know him through that. I hadn't really known him before, and we just hit it off really. When I retired, he said, "Oh, would you mind going through my books with me? Just to." He's got another, Dave Gaylor is the person who Roy Grace is based on. But David retired about 4 or 5 years earlier. So, Dave and I sort of worked in conjunction with him. My knowledge was more current. So I started working on his books. And then he came up with this idea that we should write a non-fiction. And it just came out of the blue. It was, he said, my readers are often asking me to write true stories. He said, I haven't got the credibility or the voice to write the true stories. So would you write a non-fiction with me based on Roy Grace novels? And he'd already run it past his publishers and his agent. And I just thought, well, I like writing. I've always liked writing. I like losing myself in a, even if it was in some dry old report, I used to like losing myself in it and seeing how the words came out on the page. But he basically said, look, you'll do all the heavy lifting, you'll do all the work. But I will, I'll be with you every step of the way. I'll edit, I'll coach you, I'll help you find your voice, and it was a real, why wouldn't you? I mean, we know one of the crime
Snap his hand off.
Yeah, absolutely, which is what I did. And we ended up, after many drafts and so much support from, our agent and our editor, coming up with Death Comes Knocking, which came out in 2016 and went to, I think, number 8 or number 7 in the Sunday Times top 10 bestseller list for 1 week. But apparently you're allowed to.
Doesn't matter. You can. That's it. No, you just even a breeze. That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I absolutely love about it, and I keep going back to it and reading the different stories, is you've weaved some humour into here as well. And you've given people, especially me, Northern lass, a real insight into the kind of the streets and the stuff, the crimes that happen within Brighton. Was that intentional, the humour, or is it just me that's dark?
No, it really was, because what I wanted to do with the book, and I discussed this at length with Peter, and we kind of had a look think how we would do it. Is obviously we wanted to link it in with the Roy Grace novels. That was the premise.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show what it really felt like to be a police officer in a city like Brighton and Hove. With that comes some horror. So we talked about it a minute ago. Some stuff that really hits you and gets you and is just awful. But also there's some very stupid people and some very crazy things that happen, and crazy things that I've done as well. But I just thought, well, to do this justice, I need to, I want to talk about them.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because there is a chapter in there called Laughing Policemen, which there is humour throughout in various parts, but Laughing Policemen is about kind of the more light-hearted side of policing.
Yeah.
And when I first drafted that, my wife, who's my go-to first reader, she took it, she read the chapter, gave it back to me, and she said, "You can see why they say comedy is so hard to write." I took that as feedback and I had to go back and rewrite it.
Well, I think you got it just right. When you left when you retired from the police service, did you know you were going to become a writer or an advisor, or because you work on scripts as well, don't you?
Yeah, I did. No, I did. I wouldn't say I knew. I wanted, once Peter put this offer to me, I thought, and really got into it and started really enjoying it. I thought, yeah, do you know what? I would really love to continue this. and you know, at that time though, it was kind of, well, we'll get this book done and see what happens. But it was interesting because, you know, Babes in the Wood was a chapter in Death Comes Knocking originally. Just the bit that I was involved in with reference to the other, you know, the previous case. And a few weeks before we were due to submit the very final, you've got no chance to change this draft, you know,
there's no going back
to my publishers. We heard, well, Sussex Police told me that we had to take the chapter out because Bishop had been rearrested for the Babes in the Wood murders, so we had to take the chapter out, weave the book back together again, weave Death Comes Knocking back together again. And then after that, I said to Peter, do you know what? I reckon there's a whole book in this. I reckon if we do this properly, there's a whole book in it. It might take time. I said, and I talked about the trial and how the process and all of that.
Yeah.
I said, but I reckon we've got something special here. And that kind of led to book 2. And now I've started to write fiction, which is a whole different ballgame.
I know. So I wanted to ask you about that. What have we got in the pipeline? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, my agent has got a book that I've kind of got a working title of Bad for Good.
Right.
And basically, it's about policing, would you believe? But the premise of the book is what happens when police are cut so badly that state-sponsored vigilantism takes over, and the body count starts to rise. And there's one woman, my protagonist, one woman who's up against establishment colleagues to try and save the city from basic carnage. That's not the best pitch line that I've ever come up with, but I will come up with a better one when
it sold it to me. So when do we think that'll be out then? Are we getting it?
Well, this is it. My agent, hopefully my agent will start pushing around publishers in the next month or so. Well, but I hope by the time it comes out, we might have some news. But yeah, hopefully this year to 2021 or early 2022.
How did you find the difference then between writing non-fiction and fiction? How easy or hard was it to adapt?
It was swings and roundabouts really, because you know with non-fiction, you know, your stories are there, your characters are there. You have to kind of be faithful to the truth. So you can't kind of kill people off that you don't like, or you can't give somebody a character trait that they that they haven't got. So with fiction, you know, obviously you've got the ability to kind of just invent the world and invent, you know, how it all progresses. But you know, that's as hard as it is easy really, because you know, when you're thinking about a character that you're creating in your head, it's being able to write that in a way that will mean that my protagonist, for example, is a senior policewoman, and that's, you know, and I knew it's going to be a challenge for me as a bloke to write a woman as
that's interesting.
And that was my agent's suggestion. I think she just wanted to make it even harder to write. You know, and I was really, you know, I'd obviously worked with, you know, lots of senior police women over the years, and you know, some brilliant ones, and you know, but did I really know what made them tick? Did I really know, you know, the pressures that they experienced in getting to the level that they did, and two, being able to sustain it and sustain it. So I spoke to so many ex-colleagues about, you know, got a couple of them to read it and just sort of say, you know, have I absolutely got this? And some of the feedback I would never in a million years have spotted, you know, about how I deal with gender.
Right, okay.
Which just goes to show, you know, the difference, you know. Go on, sorry.
I just have this image in my head of, is it Mel Gibson? Is the film As Good As It Gets, where he's pulling on the female tights and painting his nails and you're pretending to be a woman for a day? No?
No, I must admit, I've never done that. I'm not a method author. But no, I mean, you know, things like, you know, one of them said, you know, when I asked her to read it, she said, I was just hoping it wasn't going to be some kind of clumsy feminist sort of tome about, you know, about women's struggle, but you know, the gender was in the background, And you know, and some of the, you know, I mean, she was this particular friend of mine died. She ended up at the same level as my protagonist. Uh, you know, and she said, you know, it wasn't all bad on the way up. She said, yeah, it was a struggle. She said the biggest struggle was around part-time working more than gender. This was her, this is her saying it, not me. You know, about being able to, you know, progress as a part-time worker, because it was expected that she would be the part-time worker and not her husband, and how that then sort of manifested itself in her own operational confidence and credibility, which is very, very important when, you know, about promotion in the police. You know, you have to be, you know, managerially and organisationally competent, but you also have to be operationally competent, and you have to be able to do certain things at certain ranks. So she said, you know, it was just that was the struggle for her, and you know, that kind of, you know, wanting to be, you know, a fabulous police officer and a fabulous mum and a fabulous wife and a fabulous human being. And, you know, she achieved every one of that. I don't know what she was like as a wife, obviously, but she achieved, or a mum. But she certainly, you know, she's very, very much, you know, she cracked it. But she has got, you know, she won't mind me saying this. She's got imposter syndrome coming out of her ears.
Okay.
And is, you know, she doesn't see herself as others see her.
Yeah, I think we all suffer from that, and I think as writers as well, we're particularly prone to that. And, you know, it's when we have insecurities coming out of our ears, and because it's quite a lonely profession as well, and you can spend, well, you know yourself, you can spend hours, days, weeks, months writing a book, and you've no idea how it's going to be received. And I mean, you know, I always hate everything I've ever written. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and people don't expect it, because I think people have a preconception about, you know, how a police officer would deal with feedback and deal with negativity, you know, and you just kind of, oh yeah, brush it off, you know, big rusty sufty police officer, not a bit of it, you know. I can't read and digest my editor's comments straight away. I have to read them, go and feel sorry for myself, and then come back and be a grown up. Same with my agent's comments, and you know, I with Death Comes Knocking, I gave up. I don't read any reviews now at all. I don't need any, and that started for me in about a week after Death Comes Knocking came out, and I wasn't prepared for this, but you know, people with putting 1-star comments on there saying, I mean, the title is Policing Roy Grace's Brighton. Death Comes Knocking, Policing Roy Grace's Brighton. So people giving 1 star saying there's too much about Roy Grace in this. Why are we, you know, why did he have to use the crutch of Roy Grace? You know, read the cover. But that, you know, that I remember when I read that, I was going up to Harrogate for the crime festival.
Oh yeah.
And I was lucky enough. Peter was the programming chair that year, so I got a panel. The next day, I was on a panel at Harrogate, and it was just amazing. And I was on the kind of little hopper train from Leeds or wherever it was over to Harrogate, and I could see, you could tell other authors were coming there, you know, like their overnight bags and that. Oh yeah. And I read this, and I just thought, you're all proper authors. What am I doing? And I got there, and I spoke to Peter, and Peter's like, yeah, you know, you just got to brush it off. You've got to brush it off. And I thought, it's not that easy. You know, I'm a new author. Who am I kidding? And then, so I did my panel, and it was all fine. I had a great time up there. And then I saw a panel. In fact, it was Peter interviewing Martina Cole.
Oh yeah.
And I sat there listening to, and she said, in her own, I won't try to do an impression of far too good, you know, Diamond Dagger winner this year, and she, you know, with a fag and a glass of wine, she's saying, you know, I never read reviews, you know, I never read reviews because they're not for me, they're for other authors, you know, I can't do anything about it, they're for not other authors, they're for readers. They're not for me. So and in that moment I thought, you know, it's the only way I can protect myself from feeling so down about the 1 star. So I don't even read, you know, I mean, I know that Babes in the Wood is sitting at about 4.5, 4.7 stars on loads of reviews. Death Comes Knocking, around sort of four to five somewhere. I know that because you see it when you look on it. I
Yeah.
never read the reviews, good or bad. I just think, because I'm not very good at taking it.
Yeah.
I dwell on those 1 stars and not think about the good reviews that are with it.
Yeah, I think when my first book came out, I read because I went to advanced readers first, and I got some really good reviews. I've had one star review, and the reviewer detailed the whole of the book, and her bottom line said, "I'm giving this 1 star, but I actually quite enjoyed it." And I just thought, well, that for me just sums up exactly why reviews are really, I mean, they're great to get the 5-star ones, but yeah, you have to develop a thick skin, I think.
Yeah, and that there are reviewers that are very analytical. They know what they're talking about, but everything else is just down to taste.
Yeah, it is.
And it's I mean, I'm saying it now, but if I'm reading a 1-star or reading that 1-star review back in 2016, I don't think that at all. I thought it was a you think
it's a personal attack, don't you?
Am I right? Sorry.
Yeah, you think it's a personal attack.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so we're going to do some quick fire questions now. I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, so I won't keep you too much longer, but we've got some quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What's your favourite book?
My favourite book is, my favourite series. Can I go to my favourite series?
Yeah.
It's M.W. Craven, Mike Craven, Washington
Poe.
Washington Post.
And Tilly.
Yeah, I knew you said Washington and Poe. Washington, yeah. I love them.
I do. He's coming on. I'm interviewing him in a couple of weeks. Yeah. I cannot wait.
I think he thinks I'm stalking him because I'm always on social media. But he's brilliant. I love the stories are kind of twisty and dark enough, but that relationship between Poe and Tilly is just delightful. I love it.
Just the character of Tilly, you just want to take her and give her a big hug, don't you? It's fine, the world's fine.
Would let you, would she? She
no, she won't.
Yeah, no, I love his books, and I can't.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm good on that one then. If you would you consider writing in a different genre other than police procedural or crime?
Not at the moment. I don't think I've got the confidence to do it. I'm kind of, I see myself as, I've written 2 non-fictions, but I see myself as a debut, Bad for Good being a debut crime novel. So I don't feel the confidence to write in an area that I don't know, which is probably being a bit of a wuss, to be honest, because
so there's no romantic novel coming anytime soon.
No young adults, no sci-fi or anything like that.
As a child, which books did you love?
Well, I used to love historical fiction. Actually, I used to love Wilbur Smith's books, and I still do love Wilbur Smith's books because I just love being taken to places that I'm never likely to see, and just and to eras that I'm obviously never going to experience. And you just get this. I'm just invested in them from page one. And some of them are lengthy old books, and the tale kind of takes you across continents and decades and centuries sometimes. But it just keeps you with him. He really does.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that with C.J. Sampson. I love his books. That's kind of want to get lost and don't want to face the real world at all. Next question. When you sit down to write, do you have a routine or a favorite drink or favorite snack that you need to have?
I like to have music on.
Yeah.
And that really depends on what I'm feeling at the moment. At the moment, I'm kind of into musicals. I've got some musicals playlists, and that's because I think with lockdown, I quite like musical theatre, and I'm quite missing going to the theatre. So musicals, a bit of Hamilton going off of that, and also I find them quite inspiring because they're quite often lyrically they're so clever with the with the way in which they portray messages and emotions and that sort of thing, that I find that quite inspiring when I'm writing, to try and sort of try and have that discipline to be able to sort of be, you know, absolutely nail what I'm trying to say and the way I'm trying to say it with as few words as possible.
Yeah, I've got a Hans Zimmer playlist that I listen to
Yeah.
when I'm writing a particularly intense scene as well.
Yeah. I think you know, most authors I've spoken to, you know, some like absolute silence, but some choose their music for a particular reason. And but other than that, I have to turn off. I mean, I do keep the internet on, but I don't open Facebook, Twitter, emails, anything like that, because I am Mr. Procrastinate, and I will go, oh, you know, that email about PPI looks really important. I'm going to
I'll deal with that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Snap, there's a lot of discipline involved in being a writer.
No, there is, because as you say, you're on your own, so you know no one's going to catch you out if you don't do it, other than yourself.
No, exactly. And then you realise you've got a deadline coming in 3 weeks, and you've spent 3 months browsing the internet.
Yeah.
You know, every cat video that's going.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us where we can find out more about you and how people can get in touch. I'll put all the links in the show notes anyway, but if you just tell us now.
Okay, yeah. So I've got a website which is www.policeadvisor, and it's with an OR, policeadvisor.co.uk. And that website, you can see all of the advisory services that I provide. You can see my team of experts, my ever-growing team of experts, because you can't know everything in policing. So I've got people like Kate Bendelow on forensics, Leslie McAvoy on psychology. I've got all sorts of experts on there. I've just got some experts from the Republic of Ireland and Scotland, because their policing is different. So I kind of a bit of a one-stop shop for anything to do with crime through that website, and you can see the services. So I do one-to-ones, I'll do manuscript reviews, I'll answer questions sort of sent to me, and also any courses and events we've got coming up. So that's policeadvisor.co.uk, and you can contact me through there, subscribe to my newsletter, etc.
Fantastic. And if you do go to the website, you must check out Bartlett's bloopers. Because after I'd written my first book, I kind of was checking you out, went to the blog and thought, oh yeah, I've made a few of them mistakes. delete.
Bartlett's bloopers are the things that make me a terrible person to watch crime fiction on TV. Or, well, obviously it's not such a communal activity when you're reading, but you know, some of it. And my biggest one, did I give you this one about the way officers address each other?
Yeah.
I mean, that is my one that in fact, I'm reviewing a book at the moment, and this officer suddenly called, well, it's called by surname, and then I remembered a few chapters earlier they said that everyone calls him by his surname, you know, so that's a kind of nickname.
That was all right.
But I've even written a blog on this, because it's everyone thinks that policing is this hierarchical Bartlett. Yes, you know, and it's not like that at all. It's a workplace where, you know, people get on with each other, they're friends, they fall out, they've known each other for years, they've, you know, tolerated each other for years, and it's just like any other workplace. You know, it's not, we don't shout at each other so much.
Yeah, but in fiction, Graham, it's boring if people don't shout.
Another way is to make it interesting. I mean, you know, I'd spent 30 years of a roller coaster and never heard my surname shouted, so.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on, Graham. It's been absolutely brilliant. And when your book is out, I want you to come back on and talk to us about it a bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Right, and you've agreed to that now live. It's
contract signed. Yeah, no, I'd love to. I'm really flattered that you've asked me to come on this. And
no problem at all, honestly. I mean, I can't, to every author that I'm connected with, I've sang your praises very highly, because you've rescued me from definite plot holes and certain 1-star reviews. So yeah,
we can grab you, don't we?
So thank you ever so much. Take care and have a lovely day.
And you, thank you, Kat. Thank you.
There we go.
Super. Oh, I really enjoyed that.
Good.
I don't mean to sound surprised.